Jack Ellis had never taken to dry land. Even when he was a boy, he felt wrong without the sway of the sea under his feet. He didn't much care for crowds, cities, or the hum of streetlights. What he loved was the creak of weathered wood, the shriek of gulls, and the distant boom of waves battering the headland cliffs. By the time he was 35, he'd become one of the last truly independent fishermen left off the coast of Maine. No crew. No government subsidies. Just the Silhouette, a long-suffering trawler with a rust-stained hull and a temperamental engine that coughed like a dying smoker on cold mornings. Jack lived in the village of Grief Harbor, a town so small and forgotten it didn't appear on most maps. It clung to the rocky coast like moss, surrounded by sheer cliffs and thick woods. The locals were quiet, hard-edged folk with sea salt in their blood and secrets in their bones. It was early October when he arrived. The sky had begun to bruise purple when the knock came on Jack's weathered door. His small cottage sat on a windswept rise overlooking the bay. Jack, still dripping rainwater from his last haul, answered it with a growl. What stood there wasn't what he expected. The man was tall, unnaturally so, and rail-thin, like something pulled from a corpse-dresser's closet. He wore a long black coat, its edges fluttering in the wind, and a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. Despite the chill, he wasn't shivering. "You are Jack Ellis," the man said. It wasn't a question. Jack squinted, arms crossed. "Who's asking?" The man reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed envelope. It was thick, almost bloated, with cash. "I need passage. Deep passage." Jack didn't reach for the envelope. "What kind of passage?" The stranger tilted his head slightly, as if weighing how much to say. "Out past where the fish sleep. To a place your charts won't show. A place called the Drop." Jack stiffened. He'd heard the name before. A cold-water trench, miles offshore, steep and sudden as a snapped cable. Most fishermen gave it a wide berth. The waters there were strange. Compass needles spun. Engines faltered. Men, on the rare occasion they went there, spoke afterward with hushed voices and trembling hands. "Don't go feeding the dark," old Riley had said once, after too many drinks. "It bites back." "I'm not a tour boat," Jack said finally. "You want to see whales, go rent binoculars." "I'll pay you 5,000, the man said, pushing the envelope forward. Jack stared. That was nearly 2 months' income. "I'll supply the bait. I'll handle the equipment. All I need is your boat, and your silence." Jack hesitated. A lifetime at sea had taught him to trust his gut, and his gut was tying knots. But $5,000 was $5,000. He reached out and took the envelope. "Be at the dock," the stranger said, turning away into the fog. "Before dawn. Don't be late." That night, Jack didn't sleep. The wind screamed through the pine trees behind his cottage. Somewhere out over the sea, something boomed, distant, wet, and wrong. He poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon and sat at the table, watching the storm clouds swallow the moon. He told himself it was just another charter. Just a weird one. But deep down, something else stirred. Something colder than fear. The sea was a mirror at dawn. Jack stood on the weather-beaten dock, his breath clouding in the cold morning air. The salty tang stung his nostrils as gulls squawked and wheeled overhead. Around him, other fishermen prepared their boats for the day's work, shouting good-natured jabs and promises of big hauls. But Jack's mind wasn't on mackerel or cod. He scanned the horizon. The stranger was already waiting by the rusted buoy, his long coat buttoned tight despite the warming sun. The wide brim of his hat shadowed his face, but Jack could see the faint outline of pale skin, almost translucent. Jack's boat, the Silhouette, creaked as it rocked gently against the mooring ropes. It looked like a ghost itself, weathered wood stained with years of salt, the cabin window cracked and fogged. Jack pulled his coat tighter and started the engine, the old diesel coughing to life with a familiar groan. As they pushed off from the harbor, the stranger didn't say a word. Jack eyed him carefully. He was a man who seemed more shadow than flesh, still and cold as a marble statue. His hands were thin and long, clutching the boat's railing as though it might dissolve. "Name's Jack," he said, breaking the silence. The stranger's pale lips twitched faintly. "I am called Corbin." Jack nodded, unsure whether it was a name or a warning. The town slipped away behind them, small houses shrinking to specks, the cliffs turning into jagged teeth. The further they sailed, the colder the air became. The sun climbed higher, but the sea held a heavy fog low on the waves, like a creeping beast. Jack tried to keep the mood light. "So, Corbin," he said, glancing sideways. "What brings you to the drop? Most people think it's cursed. Dangerous. Why go there?" Corbin's eyes were fixed on the horizon, dark and unfathomable. "Some places are not meant to be seen," he whispered. "But some truths must be found, even at great cost." Jack swallowed hard, suddenly wishing he hadn't accepted the money. Corbin produced a strange, black box from under his coat. Inside were rods and reels unlike any Jack had ever seen, industrial, heavy-duty, with cables thick as his wrist. Then he pulled out the bait. Jack's stomach turned. It wasn't fish. Not any kind of normal bait. It was something else. A shimmering mass, iridescent and pulsing softly. It looked alive, almost breathing. Jack reached out, but Corbin's voice stopped him. "Do not touch. The bait is not ordinary. It calls to them." "Who?" Jack asked, eyes wide. "Them," Corbin said, voice low. "The things that lurk below the drop." Hours passed. The sun disappeared behind a wall of fog. The depth gauge tumbled down rapidly, from a few hundred feet to thousands. Jack's compass spun wildly. "The drop," Corbin said softly. The sea beneath them turned blacker than night, swallowing light. Jack could feel the boat shudder, as if standing at the edge of the world. Jack watched the depth gauge spin into numbers that made no sense. 5,000 feet. 7,000, and then it flatlined, flickering in and out. He squinted against the fog, staring down into the water that had turned from blue-green to an impossible black. It was like staring into a pit that swallowed all hope of light. "This is no place for fishing," Jack muttered, his voice barely audible over the engine's low rumble. Corbin said nothing. His eyes were locked on the depths, as if listening for something Jack couldn't hear. The fog pressed in around the silhouette, swallowing the horizon. The ocean, once lively with waves, fell into unnatural stillness. The only sounds were the boat's engine and the occasional creak of old wood. Jack's heart thumped hard. It was the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, it was watching. Waiting. He glanced over at Corbin, who now held a heavy fishing rod, the line already cast deep into the void. "Why here?" Jack asked. "What exactly are we fishing for?" Corbin's voice was a rasp. "Not fish. Not prey. Something ancient." Suddenly, the wind picked up. It swept over the water like a breath from another world. Jack heard it then, faint whispers carried in the gusts. He shook his head. "I'm imagining things." But the whispers came again, like the sea was speaking in tongues. "Come closer. Feed us. The bait waits." Hours passed. Jack felt the rod in Corbin's hands twitch. Suddenly, the reel screamed, a scream like metal tearing apart. "Got something." Corbin hissed, muscles taut. Jack grabbed the backup rod, prepared for anything. The line tugged and writhed, fighting like a demon beneath the waves. The boat lurched. Jack peered over the rail. A black shadow moved just beneath the surface. It was massive. Too massive for any known sea creature. The water rippled and bubbled, but no shape fully emerged. Jack felt the chill again, colder than any ocean wind. Something unseen was watching them. Corbin whispered, almost to himself, "It's hungry. The drop is hungry." Jack swallowed hard. "Let's reel it in and get out." But the stranger shook his head. "This is only the beginning." Jack's hands ached from tightening the reel. The heavy rod bent under the pressure of something immense deep below. It wasn't just a fish, it was a force that seemed to resist every pull with unnatural strength. The line jerked violently, then slackened. Corbin's eyes were wide, the pale skin around them taut and almost translucent. "Keep steady," he said, voice barely a whisper. Jack glanced down at the black water. It was impossible to see anything, but he felt the presence lurking just beneath, waiting. The sun vanished behind thick clouds as the boat drifted in the strange calm. The water started to bubble and hiss as if boiling, but the temperature was freezing cold. Jack's breath caught when he saw something faint, a shimmer, like the ripple of a shadow moving just beyond sight. "What is that?" Jack asked. "They are waking," Corbin replied, his voice shaking. Jack's heart hammered. Corbin pulled from his coat a small container holding a strange glowing bait, a piece of flesh that seemed to pulse with faint light. "It calls to them," he said, fastening the bait to the hook. Jack reached out, unable to stop himself. The bait felt cold and wet, almost alive. It throbbed in his palm. Suddenly, a wave rocked the boat violently. The line snapped taut. Jack scrambled to hold it steady. The reel screamed as something enormous took the bait. The boat groaned and rocked, pulled hard in the sea's grip. From the depths came a low, guttural sound, like a growl mixed with a moan. Jack's skin prickled with fear. The water churned. A dark mass rose just below the surface, huge, shapeless, moving with a terrible grace. Jack caught a glimpse of eyes, not like any fish or whale he'd ever seen. They were wrong. Too many, and glowing faintly red. He stumbled back. What is that thing?" Corbin looked at him, pale as death. "It's what the drop feeds on." The boat lurched again, pulled by the creature's strength. Jack realized with horror they were no longer in control. The sea around them darkened, swallowing the sun's last light. And in the abyss below, something waited. Watching. Hungry. Jack's fingers were numb from cold as he slowly let the reel unwind. The strange bait dangled over the edge of the silhouette, disappearing into the black maw of the ocean. The silence was almost suffocating, broken only by the faint hiss of water against the hull. "Are you sure this is safe?" Jack asked, voice tight. Corbin didn't answer immediately. His eyes never left the spot where the bait vanished. "Safe? Nothing here is safe," he finally said. "But if we want to see, if we want answers, we must tempt it." Time stretched endlessly. Jack paced the deck, stealing glances at the fog rolling thick and low. The boat felt smaller, claustrophobic, as if the ocean itself was pressing in. "Why do you think it's down there?" Jack asked suddenly. Corbin's voice was low. "Because it's old. Older than any living thing. It feeds on fear, on memory, on darkness." Jack swallowed. "Sounds like a nightmare." "Nightmares are born here," Corbin said. "In the deep." Without warning, the line jerked violently. Jack grabbed the rod, muscles straining against the unknown force. "Hold on!" Corbin shouted. The reel spun fast as the creature below fought to drag the bait, and the boat, under. Jack's knuckles whitened as he fought to keep the line steady. Then, the strangest thing happened. The line slackened suddenly. The boat rocked gently in the aftermath. The sea had gone calm, too calm. Jack stared into the darkness below. The bait was gone. "Did it take the bait?" he asked. Corbin nodded slowly. "And now, we wait." A chill crawled up Jack's spine as whispers curled through the fog, unintelligible and ancient. He felt eyes on him, invisible but heavy. "Do you hear that?" Jack asked. Corbin's face was grave. "They are calling." Jack wished with all his heart they were wrong. Night fell like a curtain, swallowing the pale glow of the fog. Jack sat frozen on the deck, eyes wide and heart pounding. The ocean was unnaturally still, as if it had stopped breathing altogether. From the depths came faint ripples, like the slow pulse of a giant heart. Corbin stood silently, chanting under his breath in a language Jack didn't understand, a low hum that seemed to stir the sea itself. Suddenly, the water roiled violently. A monstrous shape surged upward, breaking the surface with a terrible splash. It was massive, bigger than any whale, but grotesque, with skin like wet tar, mottled with glowing veins. It had no eyes in the usual places. Instead, dozens of smaller eyes flickered across its body, each glowing a sinister red. Jack gagged on the salty air, stumbling back. Corbin's voice cut through the chaos. "It's the thing beneath the drop, the Watcher, the Devourer." Jack tried to speak but his throat was dry. The creature moved with eerie intelligence, circling the boat like a predator. Jack felt its gaze, millions of unseen eyes boring into his soul. Corbin stepped forward, raising his hands. "I offered my soul to it once. Now it feeds. It wants another." Jack realized with horror that Corbin was offering himself. "No!" Jack shouted. But the stranger smiled, a terrible, resigned smile. The creature reached out, tendrils of black water lashing up and wrapping around Corbin's body. Corbin disappeared beneath the waves without a sound. The sea calmed instantly. Jack was alone. He sank to his knees, shaking. The ocean whispered again, hungry, waiting. Jack never spoke of that night again. The silhouette was found drifting months later, empty except for a single fishing rod bent out of shape. Fishermen tell stories now of a ghost ship on the horizon, surrounded by thick fog. And if you listen carefully, on quiet nights by the sea, you can hear the whispers, calling for bait.